you want to start this one?
Okay. So the problem at hand, as you probably all heard by now, and since the beginning of this last summer, actually earlier than that, is that there was an outbreak of actually not an outbreak, but a reinforcement of one of the actors in the Syrian conflict, and the particularity of the Islamic State, and its particularity was to have within its own ranks a lot of fighters from all over the world, and specifically from Europe. So the focus on the question was first to define what was a foreign fighter, and we kind of defined it as a UK citizen, since we are treating with a policy which regards the United Kingdom, a UK citizen that have been actively involved in global Islamist extremist movements. I think it's important to underline the extremist movements, Islamic, because before we were only speaking about Islamist, and it's important to precise it, in the Middle East and North Africa, because it's not, these kinds of situations do not solely happen in Iraq and Syria, but also in Mali or in Libya. So particularly, these individuals are involved in Yemen, Syria, North Africa, East Africa, and Iraq. I will not go into the details of each of these organizations. You probably are aware of them. I will continue. Okay. So the context for this thing, it's been in the news quite a lot recently, for a reason. Since actually this is only November 2014, so it's been a couple of months already. There was already 60 returnees from these war zones. So how do we deal with it, basically? For now, until now, the UK government has applied long jail terms, and they're trying to ban, by confiscating passports and ID cards, more from coming back to England. So the problem is the government's focus has been essentially on the threats returnees pose, namely concerning terrorist attack, which happened like it happened in Paris a week ago now. So our focus will be on the returnees themselves, how they can be rehabilitated back into society, western side, at least the UK, and their potential to help future returnees and prevent persons vulnerable to radicalization from becoming terrorists and posing a terrorist threat here in the United Kingdom.
So kind of this slide is kind of about who we're actually talking about. So we're specifically talking about people that have left the criminal justice system, right? So we're not talking about trying to change any laws or policies. These are people that have already left. It's beyond the scope of our proposal today to change how the criminal system deals with returnees. So we're specifically talking about the returnees as innocent people after they've left the prison system. And so that's kind of our focus. And this is actually our proposal itself. We're calling it the National Rehabilitation Scheme. And what we're doing is we're situating, or rather we're embedding returnees, ex-extremists, within the Muslim community as a way of rehabilitation. So what happens is the Muslim community centres across the country, leaders, social workers, social personnel, basically people that are important individuals within Muslim communities, they can opt in, they can volunteer to be part of our national scheme that we're proposing. And they will get training from the government. This is across the country. And people coming out of prison, coming out of detention, coming out of surveillance, Muslim communities sign up to this scheme. And this scheme would help ex-extremist returnees actually rehabilitate into Muslim communities. And also the scheme would provide a point of contact for these returnees in the wider society, so non-Muslim society as well. So you have these people who've gone through radicalisation, who've possibly murdered, who've been part in war, they've come back to Britain, they've been arrested, they may have done jail time, they've been detained for long periods of time, and there's an opportunity to actually rehabilitate that. So we're conceiving of returnees as essentially victims of radicalisation, victims of extremism, and it's helping these individuals build a life again within Muslim communities. Because we also kind of reason that if you're an ex-extremist fighting, for a radical Islamist movement, you're probably not, being part of a kind of general NHS-funded social scheme might not be as effective as being part of a Muslim community that helps you with that.
So, looking at the implementation of that, the government would first have a point of contact with the Muslim leaders, and we look in that sense. Government would obviously have quite a good idea already of who are kind of key leaders in different areas and who would be people that would be effective, and they would go and speak to them and kind of say, this is a program that could really help in a more effective way, in a more sort of tailored way to people in Muslim communities, and give the view that this could be beneficial not just for the Muslim community itself, but in sort of integration and cross dialogue between and sort of embedding that more within British society. Already rehabilitated people should take part in it as well. So it's not just you finish the scheme, you're rehabilitated, and that's you go out and you're finished. You could also come back and contribute again within the system and help people, possibly even preventative measures, not even people coming back, but people who are potentially at threat of being radicalized because they've been otherized by the society, or they feel isolated and they feel disaffected. And training people in this scheme to prepare the individuals return into society is also very important.
Yes, so the benefits, obviously there's long-term effectiveness because we establish a dialogue between the ex-jihadists and Muslim community leaders, and it would allow the Muslim community to reintegrate individuals hopefully back into society. Trust would be a key issue. I'm not sure how much cooperation there is in this at the moment between Muslim communities and the government, but this is a type of scheme where you start bit by bit. It's just have some key personnel who you could trust. You both have the same joint aim, which is to stop these people who fought in Iraq and ISIS coming back and harming the UK. Also, because we mentioned before the word Islamist, it's kind of don't like that word Islamist because it's not. They're terrorists. They're not Islamists. It would be like the Norwegian who killed 80 people, being called a Christianist. No one called him that. So, and it's an opt-in scheme, so it doesn't involve unwilling stakeholders, but we've made the point that if you engage in this scheme, if Muslim communities leaders decided to engage in this scheme, obviously, if a terrorist attack weren't committed, people wouldn't go around calling them Islamists. And we've seen kind of the consequences of the attack in Paris. There was 25,000 people rally in Dresden. A refugee was killed by neo-Nazis there, and they tweeted that would be that was only their first step. So it's not only, both sides can definitely help on this. And key point as well is that learn about the root causes of extremism. So once you speak to someone, if you think you can rehabilitate them, then when the next group, if there is a next group, will be come back, you can having known what other people have said, you can kind of refine your methods to become more effective. And
last slide.
So the cycle that we're looking at the moment, and because it is a process, it's not something that can happen quickly. This is something that we expect to take a certain period of time once the sort of all the legal proceedings have gone through. And I suppose the start of this is to insert somebody that's been known, or an ex-fighter or extremist, into a scheme, to go through the process, and this goes through sort of processes of conversation with therapists, but also with social workers and stuff like that, and to understand the root causes of the extremism and the radicalization, and sort of trying to understand the processes, the mechanisms which made these people take the certain decisions that they made. Because obviously, the important thing to understand is that there is a rationale of becoming an extremist and of taking that decision, and it's something that we need to understand. And obviously, from our perspective, and from a perspective of somebody that hasn't been radicalized, it's something that's difficult to understand. We need to insert ourselves into those ways of understanding. Extremists take part also in future schemes. The idea is that the reason why it's a cycle is because somebody who's then come out of this successfully can then help other people who are also being inserted into the scheme to work that way. And obviously now we're dealing with, so far, with about 250 people. There are 500 Britons that are now fighting in different war zones with different groups. And there is a probability that at least half will come back. And so again, the numbers that we're dealing with aren't huge. So this scheme is obviously something that could work if it's tailored to those 250 groups. And yeah, so the more that this scheme works, obviously the more powerful it becomes in helping people to out of that rationale of becoming an extremist. So that's kind of the cycle. There we go.